let me say a few words about General Hayden. As you know, he's a retired four-star general who served as director of the Central Intelligence Agency from 2006 to 2009 and the National Security Agency from 1999 to 2005. In addition to leading CIA and NSA, General Hayden was the country's first principal deputy director of national intelligence and the highest-ranking military intelligence officer in the country. In all of these jobs, he worked to put a human face on American intelligence, explaining to the American people the role of espionage in protecting both American security and American liberty. As you've probably seen, those of you who've had a chance to read his recent memoirs, he once again is making that theme, making the argument that the more that Americans can understand about our intelligence process without compromising sources and methods, the better, so that they can make informed decisions. Hayden's been a frequent commentator on major news outlets and in top publications. I recently saw him on Charlie Rose. I listened to him at WTOP. He's been in a lot of different places recently. He is also currently a principal of the Chertoff Group and a distinguished visiting professor at George Mason University's Schar School of Policy and Government, where I also teach. He's on the board of the directors of Motorola Solutions and serves on a variety of other boards and consultancy. In 2013, the Intelligence and National Security Alliance awarded Hayden the 29th annual William Oliver Baker Award. General Hayden is also the first recipient of the Helms Award presented by the CIA Officers Memorial Foundation. His recent memoir, Playing to the Edge, American Intelligence in the Age of Terror, has been a New York Times bestseller and was recently selected one of the 100 most notable books of 2016. So let's give a round of applause to General Hayden.
Thank you. So, we had it set up that we're going to be behind here and kind of panel-like, but then if I had that low altitude, I don't think the radar coverage from you would have picked me up. So I figured I'll stand here and I'll probably go mobile before too long. And I think the order of march is I'm going to talk for a little bit, all right, try to lay out the book, and then we'll get into a generalized scrum. And actually, this is a real treasure for me. Generally, I'm doing it at a bookstore in Vero Beach, all right? And I recognize a lot of you people. And so I do think it could be a really interesting conversation, one that I'm looking forward to. So there will be time for the conversation, all right? So, but I'm going to transmit first. When the reason I was on so much TV is that Random pushed the paperback edition out the door about 3 weeks ago. And so they had pre-baked all these TV appearances. Charlie Rose is nothing, all right? Until you get on the Late Show at 11:30. and arranged through the publisher. No, I guess what I'm trying to tell you, no credit of mine or not me clawing my way for every available video moment that I could get. In fact, quite the opposite. There's a lot we just said, no, he just can't do it. But it was cooked in because of the rollout of the paperback, and then the world exploded with this stupid tweet storm 15 days ago from Florida. And well, anyway, what I really want to know is, how did Random know? That's a hell of a publisher who can say, no, we're going to wait until March to roll this out. Okay, so to get on with it. When I did this a year ago, when we rolled out the hardback, all right, based on my Air Force training, I had 3 main points at every stop. All right. Number 1, why did I do this? Second, what's in the book? And the third is, how does a former director get the right stuff? I mean, what's the process for clearance? Those are all actually 3 pretty good points, but a year later, the rollout of the paperback, I'm still doing the why. That's important. Still going to cover the what. But I've kind of submerged the how. And I've replaced the how to follow what with what now, given all that went on. In other words, point out some things in the book I think are really relevant to what's been going on. And maybe some things, if I had a chance to do this book now, that I would have been sure boldface or highlight or kick the podium when I'm talking about. The why part's actually probably more interesting in this group than the ones I normally talk to. I already had one conversation which was, how in God's name did you get permission to say the word Alice Springs? Yeah. That's curious for you. Give a holler, and we'll talk about that in the Q&A. So start with the why. I already told us a couple of folks up here I teach at George Mason. Actually started doing that right after I left government in what's now called the Shara School. And for the most part, my class is intelligence and policy. Occasionally, just to break my own rhythm and do something different, I'll do one on global problems, maybe do 1 in 4. And I actually did one other one that was really a lot of fun. It's called American Espionage and Popular Culture. Okay. So that gets me to be able to show maybe first episode, season 1, Homeland. Play it for the full hour, lights up, and I turn to Jose Rodriguez, the former DO, and John, the former general counsel, and say, so is that the way you guys work? And then have the conversation. So it was a lot of fun. Get the yin and the yang between the Hollywood version and the real world version. But the base course is intelligence and policy. I think I've taught it 13 times now. And I always begin in the first class, and I know there is at least one graduate here, I always begin in the first class, literally at the level of metaphysics. I begin with Plato's parable of the cave. You think back to your philosophy courses, you know, people chained up, can't move, fire, shadows, noises, what is reality, what is truth. And so I let the students spend 20 minutes discussing among themselves, is knowing truth possible? Is the pursuit of truth worthy? You know, or products of Western civilization. After 20 minutes, they all agree, sure, that's, of course. I then say, so what about the secret pursuit of secret truth? Is that possible and worthy? Yeah, okay, fine, they agree to that. And then, is the secret pursuit of secret truth compatible with a modern, transparent democracy, like the United States? And they bat that around for 15 to 20 minutes. Now, I'm here to tell you, I think I said probably taught this about 13 times, 25 to 30 students per class. I'm here to tell you that so far, those bright young men and women are batting 100% about the secret pursuit of secret truth being compatible with American democracy when they are asked the question by the former director of the Central Intelligence Agency, who has total control over their final grade. So far, it's unanimous. It's good to go. And that's all preface to what it is I want to transmit. I mean, the Socratic method is designed just to kind of get the juices going. And then I said, let me give you another proposition. The secret pursuit of secret truth is not just compatible with American democracy, it is essential to American democracy. Frightened people don't make good Democrats or Republicans. Little d, little r, both places. Frightened people begin to gnaw on their neighbors' rights and liberties. And then when they get real scared, they start to gnaw on their rights and liberties. Okay? When I, director at NSA during the September 11th attacks, on the 13th, I talked to the entire workforce. Actually, it was an empty room talking to a TV, but NSA being NSA is beamed out to all the workstations, 35,000 people around the planet. And you know, this audience especially would have a pretty good sense of what I would say. You know, thanks for being here. I mean, seriously, there are a lot of family members who are very, very concerned about their loved ones going work that day. I said, look on the bright side. I'm betting there are about 320 million Americans out there right now who wish they had your job, who wish they could come in here and actually do some of this stuff. I got tactical on them. I said, For the time being, it's defense, it's TWAA, it's threat warning, attack assessment, what happened, anything more in the pike. We'll get to defense we'll get to offense directly, but right now it's defense. And then right near the end, I got to what I actually thought was the most important part, and that's why I put it at the end, and it ties into my class with George Mason. I said, hey, look, let me let you in on what is, I think we gotta go do what we gotta go do. I said all free peoples have to balance things they love, things they would like to have in full measure, but things that the real world tells them they can't have completely. Their liberty, their security, their privacy, and their safety. And we Americans, blessed by two really big oceans and two weak and friendly neighbors, have been able to put our banner way up here next to privacy and liberty. But what had happened 2 days earlier had put that at risk. So here was the big plan. Here was the macro challenge. And I actually found the speech doing the research for the book. It was, in the notes back at Fort Meade. We are going to keep America free by making Americans feel safe again. That was the overall directive I gave, which I know a lot of veterans here from the IC know that's what it is we do all the time. Rarely has anything so essential to American democracy been so misunderstood by the people that it serves. Most Americans' impression of the intelligence community are really formed by popular culture. And I'm fond of saying that during my time at CIA, my wife and I went to more than 50 stations and bases, and not once did we meet Jack Bauer. never even ran into Jack Ryan. And so, I mean, that's an issue. That's something that I think anyone who's looked at it closely understands is in the service of and essential to the continuance of our democratic system. And most people don't know very much about it at all. And what they know is probably wrong because it's drawn from Hollywood and the needs for drama. By the way, I'm not condemning Hollywood, and I'm going to get to Homeland here before I'm done and fold it into the story. Mentioning Alice Springs, the incident I met.
What's the problem?
It's fade. Does it fade in now on you? Yeah. All right, we'll try this. I tell the story about being at Alice for a Five Eyes conference, and you had the Anglo-Saxon Bubbas in on the ops floor for all morning, and we came out after meeting for about 3 or 4 hours, and we came out into a brilliant outback sun. And those of you who've been to Alice know exactly what I mean. You had to shade your eyes until everything dilated and you could see again. And as that was happening, I turned to my Australian counterpart in this group. I'll tell it, Steve Merchant, who was the head of what was then DSD, now ASD. I said, Steve, wouldn't you like to take your countrymen back in there and show them what these kids are doing? And he said, yeah. Well, I'm sorry, that's Roman numeral 1. That's the why. This is my effort to take my countrymen, kind of put my arm around them, walk them up to the vault door, I'll punch in the cipher lock, open the door and go in and allow them to meet the people who are in this enterprise and to the degree allowed by law and policy, clue them in on what those folks are doing on their behalf. And I told you I'm not going to deeply get into the how'd you get away with it part, all right? But clearly, I mean, everyone here knows there's not a syllable in there that's not been cleared by. And in my unfortunate case, NSA and CIA and the DNI and DOD, and no one here is surprised that all four of them thought they had a right to clear all the book. And so that took about 6 months, but at the end of the day, everything, look, I know there's some things I shouldn't talk about, and I'm never going to write about it, but at the end of the day, everything I thought should be in there is in there. And in that sense, it's a pretty forward-leaning book, in addition to just telling everybody what goes on broadly at Pine Gap. Okay? So that's the why. The what? So you get the title, Playing to the Edge. Some of you may have seen the CBS Sunday Morning, February a year ago. In the out of the book, the publisher, Penguin Random House, had enlisted CBS Sunday Morning and David Martin, the Pentagon correspondent, to be kind of the agent of the first interview. And if you read chapter 13, you'll see that I'm from Pittsburgh and have some attachment, actually some history with the Steelers. And so we did it at the Steeler practice facility on the south side. And so the image that's shown on the Sunday morning video is my walking along the sidelines of the indoor field. It's February, all right? So we're walking along the sidelines of the indoor field with David Martin, and we're mic'd up. We're mic'd up, and the camera angle is a long lens look, but you can see the two of us, and my right foot's clearly coming down about 2 or 3 inches from the sideline. And so David says to me, "So Jenner, what's the title of the book? What does Playing to the Edge mean?" And in essence, what I explained to him was that we've got to use the whole field. The same way an NFL team uses the whole field when it's playing. That we would be no more successful than an NFL team if we decided, you know what, let's be a little conservative this weekend, let's keep the ball inside the hash marks. You know what that would result in for a football team. It also results in that for us. And I went on with the extended metaphor and said, David, by the way, we don't draw the lines. We don't create the edges. They come from the league office. Okay, this one, 120 yards this way, 66 2/3 that way. Steelers don't decide that. The league does. And our league office is the American political process. It could be the president's policy, it could be law, it could be raw Article 2 authority. But you know, you've all worked in this, you know how you get guidance in that package of pre-existent, fill in the blank, executive orders, laws, policies, directives, orders, and so on. But I said, David, once we've got that, when circumstances demand, you got to go all the way to the sideline. You got to use the whole field. Although you know, if you do that, you are setting yourself up for at least one really unpleasant session with the Congress of the United States, or some really unpleasant articles in some major American newspapers. They are, by the way, exclusively on the east or the west coast. The Omaha World Herald has yet to come up with any of those articles complaining. But I said, David, you know, if you play back, okay, you may be protecting yourself, or actually more nobly, you're protecting your agency, but we're not protecting you. And so we play to the edge. By the way, I wish she were here. That's my wife's title. She's the one. So I get the manuscript all done with Random House, send it up. It's all cleared. They say, great, now we need a title. Okay, you didn't say nothing about no title. And so we spent a weekend kind of mulling it over, and she said, I've read the manuscript. I've read every chapter. Playing to the edge. Now, everything after the colon, that's me. American intelligence in the age of terror. That's okay. That's my contribution to the page. So that, and here's where this talk gets edgy. I'm not doing it in the shadow of former SIG site. when I'm out there at Vero Beach, or Tuesday night I was in Seattle, okay? I get to say, in every controversial program our government has been involved in since 9/11, has my fingerprints all over it. I started the NSA surveillance program. You know, I did. Variously known as the terrorist surveillance program, the president's surveillance program. We called it Stellar Wind, because that didn't make any sense. That's exactly what those names to me, you know? And that's carried forward. I mean, that is the ancestor for all the controversial stuff we're doing now. I've probably followed 215 program, 702, and I started that on October 2nd, 2001, so my fingerprints are all over it. I didn't start the I didn't start the renditions, detentions, and interrogation program at CIA, but I inherited it. And when I got there in September of 2006, it was without a doubt a 600-pound quadruped in the middle of the room. And I spent the summer of 2006 getting effectively a master's degree on R and D and I, renditions, detentions, and interrogations. And by August, I went in and briefed Steve Hadley.
Thank you. It owns the place. I can't fix that stuff, though.
Thank you. In August, I go in there to Steve Hadley and in essence say, Steve, we got to change this program. We still need to keep it. And I point out in the book, I take great pains to say that wasn't my saying that program back then was wrong. That wasn't my saying I disagreed with what George Tenet had done. In fact, I go out of my way to say I did not disagree with George Tenet. But I did point out George had his circumstances in 2002. I had mine in 2006, and this audience will appreciate more than any I talked to. After 4 years, we had far more penetration of Al-Qaeda. We had far better idea of the nature of the organization, and most importantly, we had a really good sense of the threat they were capable of mounting against us. So I didn't have to be as extreme as George was in extremis when he set this up in late 01 and really 02. So I went into Steve Hadley and said, Steve, we're not the nation's jailers. We don't need to keep these people forever. In fact, the batch we got now, and you know this, the intel value is not zero, but it's low enough that there are some other necessities kicking in that we no longer have to have exclusive secret control over them. I recommended to Steve and then to the president, we can empty the sites. And in fact, over Labor Day weekend in 2006, we flew the last 14 from their locations, which we've still never confirmed, from their locations to Guantanamo. I was actually living in Bowling at the time. You know, it was Labor Day weekend, and on late Sunday, I get a phone call from my ops center, and all they told me was, Elvis has left the building. So the 14 were on a C-17, which, by the way, did not land between Black Site and Guantanamo. It didn't matter how many tankers it took. We're not going to subject this flight to those volunteer train spotters out there who were trying to keep book on us. We didn't close the sites, but remember I said, we modified the program, we didn't end it. We didn't close the sites, we need to keep them open. And I frankly put 2 folks in. Okay, and the fact that I know their names, Abdul Hadi al-Iraqi and Muhammad Rahim al-Afghani, kind of tells you it was a big deal when you put folks in there, we knew. We had 13 techniques when I got there. We reduced it, actually recommended to the president, we reduced it to 7. and most of the really hard ones at the top end we were pushing off. And in the conversation with the president and Condi Rice and so on, we actually reduced it from 7 to 6. We actually put a time limit on how long we would keep people back. We're not nation failures. We don't have to keep them forever. So the plan was we keep them 60 days. I could extend it, but it had to be a conscious decision on my part. Before, you grab them and like they're there forever. And because of that problem, we would not grab anybody for whom we did not already have an exit plan. That we already had a concept as to how they leave our control. Either they go to a friend or they go to the military at Guantanamo and so on. So, surveillance, rendition, detention, interrogation, targeted killing. We spent very late 07 and the first half of 08 trying to convince President Bush that he had to amp up the targeted killing program, the drone strikes, right? We're talking about drone strikes along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. We had a few, but if you look back, even now on the publicly available record, they were few and far between. And what the intelligence was showing was that Al-Qaeda was establishing in the tribal region of Pakistan safe areas that began to look a lot like the safe areas they had in Afghanistan pre-9/11. And we saw a lot of folks coming in. A lot of them were Westerners. A line I use, I think it's in the book, the kind of folk wouldn't call attention to themselves as they were standing next to you over here at Dulles in the passport line, coming back in. And they were graduating them. And I point out in the book, we press this pretty hard. I mean, it's a big deal going to fundamentally applying the laws of armed conflict outside of an internationally agreed conflict zone. I mean, those of you kind of think through your life experience there, that's different. We never said what I'm going to tell you now to President Bush, but if you took everything we said and said, okay, Hayden, you get 75 words or fewer to tell me why we ought to go do this, what it was we said effectively was, Mr. President, knowing what we know now, there will be no excusing our inaction after the next attack. And then in July, early July, the president changed. I think the popular term would be rules of engagement. That's not quite what he rewrote the finding and allowed the government or headroom to do this. And we began what, to my mind, was a very successful program of targeted killings. In July of 2008, President Obama hugged it like it was a teddy bear. In 2009, didn't increase, sustained, pretty much sustained in 10, and then 11, they kind of all went off the chart. I don't think because anybody got a better idea. I think just because there was just more kit coming online that would enable you to do this more times, more places, near simultaneously. So, playing to the edge. Okay? When I did the hardcover tour, the title of the book and what I've just looked, I mean, you're all nodding, yeah, that's good. I mean, it makes sense to me, Hayden. Yeah, like I said, you try in Seattle. So I thought I would spend most of the tour kind of in a defensive crouch, and the book's not apologetic. It's factual, and it says, "Man, that one. I wish you'd have done this." I mean, it's self-critical, but not apologetic about what we did. I mean, the line I had is, no, it was effective, it was lawful, it was appropriate. I'd do it again. And so I thought the tour a year ago, I'd be getting hostile questions and pretty much having to be very defensive about playing to the edge. As it turns out, I did not have to be defensive. Number one, you get this far from the Beltway, people begin to think differently. Okay? So my son has to, you get beyond Manassas, things are better. That was one. The second issue was the presidential campaign. And you had a candidate who now is president, actually talking about a whole bunch of things we'd never do, like killing terrorist families intentionally. And so the atmosphere had been built up so much about the campaign rhetoric that our stuff actually looked calm, reasoned. We were exercising caution. And so, my eureka moment in all this is I'm on the Bill Maher show of all places. Yes, an away game for a former director of CIA. And Maher says, hey, this guy Trump said he'd kill terrorists, women, and families, too. I go, that's not going to happen. What? I said, no. The American Armed Forces, by extension, the IC, they won't do that. And he goes, oh, you talking mutiny here? I said, no, I'm not talking mutiny. I'm just telling you that there's an ethic inside the American, first week as a cadet in ROTC, first week at the academy, first week in basic, laws of armed conflict, right? I said, I'm just saying, Bill, if that order comes down the pike, the first man or woman in an American military uniform that it hits is just going to turn around and say, I'm sorry, sir, that just ain't happening. I think he was a little surprised, frankly, that we had that ethic. So there I am going out there, with a book entitled Playing to the Edge, and I'm thinking I'm going to have to really tough defending what it was we did. I spent more time explaining, no, there are edges. Okay? There are places we should not go, and we won't go. By the way, Mar, all done with the interview, right? And the applause lights come on. All the automatons in the studio applaud, and we stand up, and he kind of leans into me for a handshake, and his mouth is next to my ear, and he kind of whispers, by the way, we really do appreciate what you guys did. There are other things out in the book. I won't dwell on them, but just kind of point out to you. Chapter 8, I think, is called Life in the Cyber Domain. Okay? It is the least remarked chapter in the book, and the one that I had the most trouble getting cleared. So somebody ain't paying attention. There's a fair amount of stuff in there. There's another chapter that I really enjoyed writing that you'll appreciate. It was called Espionage, Bureaucracy, and Family Life. And it was my attempt to try to show the burdens our profession puts not just on our officers, but on those closest to our officers. I talk about a lot of things, but one thing I talk about is CIA Family Day. We have it every September, and we turn Langley into something that looks like a big county fair. My last family day, we had over 20,000 people on campus. And now the rules, you can bring a relative kind of one bump out, mom and dad, sister, brother, son, and daughter. You can't rent a bus and bring the clan up from Louisville. It was a remarkable experience for me and my wife, Janine, to see the families. There were actually two unmistakable types. Well, one was the 20-something with mom and dad who had just driven up from Raleigh or flown in from Salt Lake, and they're walking them through the halls, and mom and dad are kind of having an out-of-body experience being actually at Langley. The other cohort that was really striking, smaller number but equally striking, were the 40-somethings who maybe had a teenager or two in tow. By the way, my wife and I would just go down in front of the cafeteria and say, hey, hi, I'm Mike Hayden, I'm the director, this is my wife. And that was it. The receiving line would start, and we would be there for the duration of the day. So when we got to see lots and lots of people. Well, this second cohort, 40-somethings, teenager or two in tow, a very normal conversation would be, Mr. Director, Mrs. Hayden, this is our daughter Margaret and our son Michael. We told them today where we work. And again, you know this more than most audiences, telling someone you are undercover is not a gift. It is a burden. And of course, you can't do that to the kids until at a certain level of maturity that they can accept the burden. Now, as my wife points out, it's very unfortunate that we all kind of measure that level of maturity at about 14, 15, 16. When the 14, 15, and 16-year-olds are probably having the most serious trust issues they will ever have in their life. And so my wife was always intrigued as to how the teenagers, responded. So she didn't, one young woman who, they've been told mom and dad work the agency, and my wife says, "Your mom works here. How did that make you feel?" And she said, "My mom's a spy." I spent a lot of time on that chapter because I wanted it. It's espionage, bureaucracy, family life. It looks like a Christmas tree. Everything else I couldn't fit in, I put in there. The whole counterintelligence problem, I dropped in there. Recruitment, it's in there. Disciplining people, it's in there. Bureaucratic overlay, oh God, it's in there. All right. But what's really and why it's got that position in the book is it's my attempt to explain. Remember, these people don't know who we are, right? That's the audience. It's my attempt to explain to them who we are. And I think I say it in the book, but I know I say it in all my public speeches. I get lots of what kind of people work for CIA. And I go, well, fundamentally, they're like your friends and neighbors. And you live where I do, they are your friends and neighbors. Our granddaughter is a very good soccer player. I mean, on a weekend out, somewhere in Fairfax County, I know him, I know her, I know him, I know him. Elliptical now, but I've run a couple of marathons, including several on and a couple after duty. So I'd be doing the WNOD, just kind of running there, and very common occurrence. A small group, 3 or 4 folks, much younger, always passing me. Never raising their eyes, never making eye contact, and just simply saying, "Looking pretty good, Mr. Director." Just keep on going. What I'm trying to describe to the larger audience that these are not aliens. They are not alien beings. They share your values. They share their values. Okay? We have common values. And what's going on here is that these good people, by their professional choice, have to apply our common values in circumstances most Americans will never face. In fact, most of them will never even become aware of. But I would just totally reject the proposition that somehow these people are different from the folks who don't turn off of 123, but keep going down the Parkway downtown. Same value set, different work, applying the same values to a different kind of challenge. So that's kind of the what. There's a background in there about the difference between NSA and CIA and going to war and integrating national and tactical and so on, which probably a special just for this group. I must tell you, one of the most heartening reviews of the book that I've gotten has been from folks like yourselves who have gifted the book to close relatives. And in many cases, the line I got back from the officer is they gave it to dad, gave it to brother, gave it to sister, and they called me and said, for the first time, I think I know exactly what you do. Not the mission, but not the text, but the broad mission and the broad ethic. Okay, so that's kind of the what. Let me just kind of hit a couple of what nows, and then, plenty of time for questions. One what now really ties into the last point about common values. Very often, and I know this happens to you, but it happens to me often in a public setting. People argue about stuff we do. All right? They will say, I disagree with that. I don't want you doing that. That violates our values, or something like that. And what I emphasize in the book, and if I had to do a revision, I'd just be, like I said, bold-faced, highlight, kicking the podium, to remind people that This is not a question of the forces of light and the forces of darkness. These are the questions that free peoples have to answer all the time. Remember back to the first paragraph here, trying to balance two things, both of which they want to have in full measure: their freedom, their security, their liberty, and their privacy. And free peoples have a conversation as to where the fulcrum is on that balance, based upon the totality of circumstances in which they find themselves. So one of my really instructional moments in that debate was foolishly accepting an invitation to go debate Judge Andy Napolitano from Fox. That's not so bad. Andy's actually a good friend of mine, despite this last, thank God. We'll get to that in the Q&A. What was foolish is I agreed to do it at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Committee, held every spring over in Washington Harbor at the Gaylord. Yeah, there I am, the former director of this and that, in front of 13,000 rabid libertarians, right? So now Napolitano goes up there and begins saying, "I'm Judge Andrew Napolitano from Fox News, and I am an unrelenting libertarian." And he goes on for another 8 minutes, telling us a whole series of untruths about what it is we do. Not intentionally, but he just doesn't know. Now it's my turn. I go up there and says, "My good friend," and he is, "my good friend Andrew Napolitano just told you that he is an unrelenting libertarian, a civil libertarian. And I am too. Boo! No, you're not! Boo!" When the booing subsided, I got to say that I'm a libertarian who's also been responsible for most of his adult life for another part of the same document that says something about providing for the common defense. And you know, we can't stand this battle line within the society. I'm not going to get into it, okay? But you know, this Russian covert influence campaign, which I think will chalk up as the most successful covert influence campaign in the history of covert influence campaigns, okay? I actually have gotten to say that covert influence campaigns do not create fractures. Covert influence campaigns only succeed in driving bigger wedges into pre-existing fractures. And that's what happened. So anyway, one of the big points I make is, hey look, this argument about did stellar wind go too far, is waterboard torture, we can go into the fine print of this you want. Unfortunately, I know a lot about all of it. But we need not demonize those with whom we disagree. And I'm really disappointed that we do that fairly routinely, okay? A couple other, I did the one all about the edges and the bar, okay? I'd really emphasize that. Yeah, I didn't think I had to. Once I told the story of what intelligence does, I thought it was self-evident that that was important stuff. It no longer appears self-evident to everyone in our current government. And so I do think I would have spent more ink talking about why intelligence makes what's the right word, an irreplaceable, an unreplaceable contribution to policy making. And I do say this in the book, but again, if I had it to do over, if I had to do it now, I would pull it forward in the book so that it would be more visible. I talk about, it's a silly cartoon, all right, but bear with me. Talk about briefing the president. Actually, for this group, I actually begin with briefing any decision maker. And I actually say it could be the Oval Office or a canvas-covered talk in some desert. But you got the intel guy and you got the decision maker. But I quickly elevated up to the Oval, so you got the intel guy and the policy maker. You got the intel guy and the president. And what I say is, they both got to get in the room. And the intel guy has got to get into the head of the president. Now, it's nice when the president knows that, so he comes at least to the middle of the room. You don't have to hunt him down somewhere. Yeah. But you gotta hunt him down. I mean, our job is to get our stuff in his head. And I say that's hard. It's always hard. Because we come into that room through different doors. Okay? He comes through the door marked vision. You know, the thing you elected him for. And we come through the door marked facts. Fact, vision. World as it is, world as we would like it to be, or at least world as we would want to make it be. Fact, vision, as is, to be. Inherently inductive. See a data, more data, more data. Data teaches me, I draw general conclusions. Inductive. Inherently deductive. First principles, how do I apply them to a specific circumstance? Fact, vision, as is, to be, inductive, deductive, pessimistic. Okay? Bob Gates, who was DCI before he was sec def, Gates is a wonderful summary. He says when a CIA analyst stops to smell the flowers, she looks around for the hearse. Inherently pessimistic, inherently optimistic. Otherwise, they don't interview for the job. They don't think they can make it different. And so this is a constant tension, all right? You got this with Clinton, Carter, Reagan, Bush, Obama. That's just what it is. You got this tension. Now we knew, after November 8th, we knew that this new guy over here had this stuff over here in extra dosage compared to previous presidents. And he has this almost preternatural confidence in his own instincts, which I quickly add are the ones that got him elected in the face of all the experts on the other stuff. So don't be quick to judge. But he does have this preternatural confidence in his own instincts, this kind of a priori view of the way the world works. He doesn't seem to have an awful lot of patience for the detailed fact guys to come in and explain the fine print. So we always knew, whoa, this one's going to be special interesting. But remember the main point, this always happens. Right? You always got the issue. It was just going to be a little heavier lift this time. It is a great American tragedy that, one, it always happens, got that, that's not a tragedy. Number two, a little harder, not a tragedy, but a little more challenging. Three, the first time we had to meet with those conflicting things, and more conflicting this time than others. The first time we had to meet was on an issue that other Americans were using to challenge his legitimacy as the President of the United States. It was fundamentally along the issue of Russian interference in the American electoral campaign. That is a perfect storm and a national tragedy. Or the perfect storm led to results in a current atmosphere that is a national tragedy, and one which we must get beyond. But again, I would draw that in a very strong point. Let me end up, and I know there are a lot of other current issues, you might want to bring them up in the Q&A. Let me end up with, well, where I began. Now, why did I do this? Okay? It was to let Americans understand. By the way, in this current debate, and I've done a lot of TV, I told you, it wasn't always voluntary, it was tied to the book. You know, hey, love your book, Hayden, now. And then we're off into tweets and Russians and GCHQ and so on. And I actually have a Twitter account, not voluntarily, but Random House creates it because it helps you push the book. There is 1/3 of our country, all right, who do not make decisions based upon data. Okay? And they all, I can show them, they're all on my phone. and so introducing those people to the reality of American espionage enterprise goes back to reinforcing, maybe that was a good idea to write the book. I mean, I get it. oh, hey, and I understand what you're doing. I hate it. I hate you. But I understand what you're doing. What we get now is, I hate you. I hate what you're doing. Well, if that's what we were doing, I'd hate me too. And I actually got to say that in several, actually with Napolitano in that debate. I said, Andy, if you were right, we wouldn't be debating. If what you said about what we do is true, we wouldn't have, there are no issues. And so, again, especially now, we need better informed citizens. So I began with, not just compatible with, but essential to. So one of the neat things in my second life is I get to come out here and get good craft beer and talk to old friends and exchange stories, and I know we're gonna have an interesting discussion. I get invited to stuff. I got invited to the season premiere showing of the second season, episode 1 of Homeland, down at the Corcoran Gallery. And I actually got to walk up to Mandy Patinkin and the cast party afterwards and say, Mr. Patinkin, hi, I'm Mike Hayden. I used to play the director of CIA too. He's actually become a very good friend. I was at another event for another series, not nearly as watched as Homeland. It was the AMC series Turn. Yeah, this audience probably more than the bookstore. The bookstore in Vero Beach. Turn's about the Culper Spy Ring on Long Island during the Revolutionary War. And I was there for episode 1, season 1, premiere, downtown DC, cast party afterwards, showed episode. It's actually not bad. I mean, they're in season 3 now. It's getting a little fantastical, kind of getting further and further away from the historical record. But season 1 was pretty well tied to the story. And I got to see episode 1, which is really tied to the story. And then I got to be on a panel after the showing and before the hors d'oeuvres. And I'm there with the historian on whose work the screenplay was written, two actors, and either the producer or the director. They were just having a conversation, and they finally turned to me, who's a guy on stage who's actually done any real spying. And what'd you think? I really liked it. They were pleased. They were pleased, but wanted a little more explanation. And I said, well, yeah, okay, good, but why? And I went back to not just compatible with, essential to, good for Americans to see that their espionage is as American as baseball and apple pie, that it goes back to the foundation of the Republic, and that the nation's first spy master, and he was really into it, was the nation's first president. Who, by the way, when he became president, demanded and got a covert action budget from the Congress, which now makes us 45 for 45 in terms of president wanting to be able to go do this. And so I got to repeat that meme, essential to American democracy. The neat thing is that I wasn't doing it at the Shar School in Arlington here at GMU. The premiere for Turn was at the National Archives. And I was doing this not just compatible with, but essential to me, about 130 feet from the Constitution and about 145 feet from a copy of the Magna Carta. And that just felt about right. Thanks very much for your attention. I know we've got time for questions. I am going to sit down for this part, maybe use that mic, and game on. Thank you.
Folks, we're going to try to do this without the mics, because as you can see, we're having a little problem with the mics. So if you would please stand and speak loudly. We'll see if that works. Otherwise, we need to pass the microphone around. So let's try it with that. Here, I'll put this on for you. You want to stand up? Okay, that can be kind of noisy if you move around.
Turn the mics off. The mic is still on.
Okay, who's got it?
General, first, let me thank you very much for your remarks. Tremendously informative. I'd like you to expand on the metaphor, playing to the edge. Perhaps by using a case example. Generally speaking, in the United States, nobody is put to death without due process. There's a trial, there's a judgment, there's a sentence passed. But in our targeted killing program, in at least one instance that I'm aware of, an American citizen was in fact targeted.
One instance intentionally.
One instance intentionally, and then regrettably, a second American citizen was killed as well. Why is that within the lines? Why is that not outside the lines?
So, this work? Yes. No, I forgot you're behind. There you go. Great question, and that's a line a lot of people argue about. All right? And
I need to repeat the question. Targeted killings of U.S. citizens, why is that inside the box? Fascinating, isn't it? That's an Obama administration decision, not Bush. It never happened in the Bush administration. And the popular image is tough guy, soft guy, right? Insensitive to law, very sensitive to law. So the first observation is that I complained about Obama administration policies from time to time. There is an amazing continuity between the two. All right, the key thing you need to understand is there are far more similarities than differences when it comes to counterterrorism between 44 and 45. And by the way, that really drove the Europeans crazy because they thought round one was just Bush and round two is going to be real different. And it wasn't. So that's one. Specific question. The legal argument is they did get due process. The Constitution requires due process. It doesn't require due judicial process. And that there was indeed a process within the executive branch that showed great care and was fully within the authority of the president as commander-in-chief. And the Constitution allots tremendous authority in Article 2 to the president, and very limited authority to Congress and the courts in the conduct of war. Okay, so that is the legal theory. One additional thing, American citizenship does not provide a shield when you become a member of an opposing armed enemy force in armed combat. Okay? So that's the argument. I personally am okay with it, I am. But this is one of those ones where I get it. I get it. You don't have to be wearing tinfoil on your head or being out here in one of the wing nuts on either side to say, you know, that one makes me a little worried. Bob Gates opposed it. And Bob Gates opposed it within the administration. So that should give you a sense, this is a really close call. And so this is one of the ones where that's where the line is, that's where the process came out. We're playing within the line the process created, but I get it. There are a lot of powerful, legitimate arguments that the line should be a little bit further back. And that's really all there is to it. I would add that one of the things we've seen in the last 15 years has been the courts assuming a more intrusive role in the conduct of armed conflict than has historically been the precedent. So you saw the Hamdan decision, the Hamdi decision, and the Boumediene decision inside the Bush administration. I'll bore you with the fine print. but each one of those said the president couldn't do what presidents have been doing since George Washington. And do you see what just happened to the current president? When he attempted to do something that actually is widely viewed as an area in which the president has tremendous authority, who comes into the country. And on 2 rounds now, you have the court saying, not so fast, big guy. And so we are seeing a shift, not just in the line, but in the methodology of how the court's becoming more active than they have been. So that if this gets to the court, it'll be very interesting to see if they intervene and actually impose a solution on the executive.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Starting with maybe the bombing of the Marine barracks through today, Islam in America, where are we going?
I see our time is nearly up. So the question was, Islam America, what's that about? Yeah, so longish answer, hope this works. I feel strongly about this. I'll try to be efficient and give you the executive summary. This is more about a civil war within Islam than it is a war between Islam and the West. I don't want to say we're just collateral damage, but we are kind of spillage. All right, now 9/11, it's in a class by itself, all right? But even Brussels, Paris, San Bernardino, Orlando, kind of spillage from what is fundamentally a war going on with, and here's how I say it publicly, because I mean it, a war going on within one of the world's great monotheisms, all right? So now you had the Obama guys refusing to say it had anything to do with Islam. That's just stupid, okay? I mean, it's all about Islam. Now, it's not about all of Islam, and for God's sake, it's not about all Muslims, but the engine for this is a conflict within the religion. Okay, hold on to your seat now. Very similar to the one within Christendom in the 17th century, ended by the 30 Years' War in 1648 and the Treaty of Westphalia. It's just the big metaphysical argument. How do you balance metaphysical faith with reason and science? How do you divorce the coercive power of the state from questions of theology? And we Westerners, we decided in the 17th century that we had plenty of reasons to kill one another, and we're just going to take religion off we're going to take religion off the list. We don't need it. So the 30 Years' War is fundamentally the last great war of religion in the West. Now again, it's imperfect, it pops up. I know, it's not binary here. But fundamentally, we don't wage war on theological or religious grounds. Islam is now trying to make that decision within itself. And its civil war is just as ugly as ours. All right, the 30 Years' War, somewhere around a quarter of the population of Europe died. No social media, okay, which distinguishes it from the current war. That's all that distinguishes it. Okay, and incredibly ugly. Now, I said the Obama, don't talk about Islam. It's violent.
It's violent extremism, like these somehow stray electrons or something that just appear naturally in nature. Okay. Now over here, we've got the Trump administration, I think, equally wrong in the other direction. Because their mean is that this is a war between civilizations. They hate us. They all hate us. Right? And Bannon has written about this. The president has kind of repeated the language. I'm sorry. The candidate has kind of repeated the language. And he's not really pulled it back much as president. So you get to the current travel ban kerfuffle. My personal view, I've signed a couple of friend of the court briefings, so I'm not a neutral guy on this, all right? Frankly, I think the president's got the authority to do it. I do. I just think it's a bad idea. Okay? It's a bad idea because, number one, it's kind of a made-up threat. You realize there was nobody in the government with their hair on fire running down there on 20 January saying, Mr. President, we got to change this. I mean, DHS didn't propose this, CIA didn't propose, DNI didn't, DOD. This comes from the campaign. And the campaign rhetoric is, they're all coming to kill us. And we have no idea who these people are. Statistically, neither of those are true. All right? In fact, in this, we don't know who they are. Yeah, we do. We actually have a really, what's the word, extreme vetting process already. We let 10,000 Syrian refugees in here last year. 8,500 were women and children. The processing time ranged 18 to 24 months per person. So it's not like it's perfect, not like there's no danger, but I think that was overblown. Okay? Then by doing that, you're really kicking some of the world's less fortunate people. And then, which I opposed, wouldn't fall in the tracks about, as a professional. As a professional, what I'm worried about is that it kind of lives that narrative, they hate us, they all hate us, this is between Islam and, fill in the blank, Christianity, the West, whatever, which is the story of the side in the civil war in Islam that we want to lose. The jihadist narrative is that there's undying enmity between the West and Islam, and you guys got to fight with us because ultimately you're going to learn they hate us and they're coming to get us. All right? So that's as much as I can put it in a quick response. I think the Obama guys were wrong for saying it didn't have anything to do with Islam, and I think the current guys are wrong by saying what we got here is a war between two civilizations. By the way, we have it within our ability to make it that. I'm hopeful we will.
Thank you.
Which I know didn't please everyone in the room. It never does. But that's my answer. What do you got? Yes. Let me go deep and now come to you. Good.
General, thank you for coming. I'm an intelligence officer, 24 years, and I'm very proud of my service, and I enjoyed my career immensely. I truly believe when you replay history that the intelligence was available to prevent 9/11. It just was not processed properly. And I can go into great detail over maybe another time to talk about what happened and why I think there's a way to process the intelligence better. But I like your views.
Sure. So the question is, was 9/11 preventable? Was there enough intelligence?
Could you use a mic?
Was there intelligence that prevented it and so on? So here's what I say consistently, all right? That 9/11 was preventable. 9/11 was inevitable. All right, so you can, and you know this, right? You can do the forensics on an aircraft accident, and you can show that accident could have been prevented if this, that, or that. Even while you know you will never be able to prevent all aircraft accidents because it is an inherently dangerous activity. And so what I would say is that although you can find a thread here and a thread here where excellence, near perfection, and perhaps heroism on the part of folk would have said, Eureka, we got to go do this. Structurally, fiscally, we had set up a structure that required amazingly good luck, heroism, in order to catch these kinds of things. I'll give you specific examples. The wall between law enforcement and foreign intelligence. You all familiar with that?